Hey everybody, just working on this week's video and thought it deserved a bit of a voiceover. I think it'll help explain what I'm doing, kind of what I was thinking while I'm working through this project. If you like this kind of video, watch to the end and let me know in the comments. Enjoy. So I'm using Adobe Illustrator here, working with 3.0 stitch spacing, which will help me get around the tighter curves of this type of font. So I'm just copying sections of 2, working my way around the template. This will mean I can use my 2-tooth pricking iron all the way around, make it a little more convenient than just using my single tooth. At the start and end of each sequence, you'll see there's an X. I use the X to mark when I use an awl to start and stop each stitch. So I'm just working it around, making sure everything's going to line up, as closely as possible. Here you can see the X right at the end here. There, I just copied it there. And this little section here, I could have actually gone a little bit tighter and just done this by using my single tooth around the whole thing. But it's kind of an experiment. It was fun to try out. The concept's there. So if you want to do this or maybe some other type of pattern on a project, it'd be kind of neat. I think I've seen it before. So this is some nubuck leather that I'm using as the padding. So I'm just rough cutting it to shape. And then that's the lining leather that I'm going to use for the exterior. This will work well because it's nice and thin and flexible, and it'll mold or shape around that padded portion well. Again, just rough cutting it to shape. So now I'm laying out that my padding piece onto the backing part and marking the corners with the awl. So my corners line up. So I'm putting down the glue on the whole surface. And I'll do the same thing on the main piece. So those marks that I just made help me align the piece correctly. Just checking the corner. Just lightly press it down and then use a glass slicker to make sure it's well adhered. So now I'm adding a second layer of glue so that I can glue the main lining down to that form. So now both pieces are dry, ready to adhere. So I'll start by lightly pressing that down and then slowly working the edges right to the corner. Just lightly at first, make sure everything's in place. And you can see me slowly finding the edges of that form, and then using that synthetic bone folder, I'll just lightly bring those corners down so that things start sticking along the outside. And then afterwards, I'll come in and get that folder right against the edge. So right there, now I'm running it right along that edge to make sure it's nice and tight. Not using a lot of pressure. So you can see that definition starting to come in. And then I run it right along to the outside to make sure the whole piece is stuck down. This is all going to get trimmed after it's stitched. So it's important to make sure that the whole piece is stuck down. There's the finished trimmed piece, ready for the main pattern. So I'll just put that down, and then I'll secure that with some light tape so that it doesn't move around on me. If you find your tape that you have is a little too sticky, rip a piece off, put it onto your bench, rub it in, and then peel it off, and the debris that's on your bench will kind of remove some of that stickiness. So we get started with that first hole using the awl, and then working along the 2-tooth iron right around that whole pattern. So since I laid this out in Illustrator, I know I can follow that pattern and it'll be accurate to the iron that I'm using. One of the benefits of working digitally first is that you can lay everything out beforehand and you know it's all going to fall in line. So just making sure everything's aligned correctly, taking my time. So now I just repeat the process along the whole pattern, using the 2-tooth iron as much as I can. And if it's a little too tight or it just doesn't work, then I get my single tooth out. You'll see that at some point. I think when I do the A and the R, you'll notice I use the 1 tooth. It's just a little too tight. There again with the awl to mark the end of that stitch line. And there again. So here you can see I'm using the single tooth iron. And in this section I mentioned earlier, I could have gone with tighter stitch spacing to better define the shape of those letters. But again, this is a bit of an experiment. One of those things that really helps to do a physical representation of it versus digitally. Digitally it seemed like it worked, but after I stitched it, it was I could have done the whole spacing a little bit tighter along these last 3 letters. And finishing off that all. So then there's the final look before I stitch it. So it comes to stitching something like this, because the entire focus is the stitching of the text you're doing or the pattern you're doing. You really want to pay attention and focus in make sure each stitch lands exactly as you want it to. So I'm really making sure that that front stitch is angled properly. My tension is even on the back and the front. Although the back's not important, in this case you won't ever see it, but at least making sure that front tension is exactly even every time. It's really good practice overall to do something like this for your stitching, so that when you do those straight runs, it becomes second nature. Another thing I'm doing is making sure that my stitch run is even with my clamp, so that the angle that I'm pulling at is the same every time. So even if it's just 1 or 2 stitches, I move that piece constantly in the clamp. So there you can see the S and the T, those are done. And it's just me working through those last 3 letters. I actually make a mistake here, which I don't realize till later. Right here, that stitch goes down. It should have gone straight across. So I've created just a V here. That was a mistake, and then undid all those stitches and then redid it, which you'll see in the final one. But one of those things when you're doing this type of pattern, it's you got to pay attention to what you're doing. It's not just a straight run. So now I'm just hammering it down, get that thread nice and flat. The hammering makes a really big difference in the end result and appearance of that stitching. Make sure you have a nice polished hammer head. If you're doing this, you don't want to damage your leather. So now I'm just going to stitch the outside of that padded portion to finish this off. So again, because I laid this out in Illustrator, I know my corners are going to line up correctly so that my stitch spacing is even all of the way around. I'm just using the pricking iron to mark the corner, creating that little X. And then right in the middle of that X, I'll use the awl to mark that corner, so that the corner is defined by a round mark and not one of the chisel marks. So now I'm just doing that final stitching all the way around the exterior. So here's a close-up of the last few stitches. So I start with my right needle, left needle comes through, cast, sink that first stitch, lock it with the back one. Right needle opens up the hole, left needle through, cast, sink that stitch. And in this case, I just bring that thread through and then I tie a knot on the back side to finish it off. So now I'm just trimming the piece to its final dimensions, just using my 2-tooth iron to set that spacing, which happens to be exactly 3 millimeters. And then just use multiple passes with my knife to get that piece cut. Using the spacing. Hey, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. 1 light pass to start. Second one, and then the third one. Going super light on this so that nothing moves. Then I use that offcut to make sure my knife or my ruler is on the same level as my cutting piece. So I just use my creasing iron to help define that edge. It's coming in from each corner and not exiting each corner. You want to preserve that nice crisp 90 degree. So you come in from the outside, see it there. I go most of the way. Not coming to the end again, coming from the outside in, there, outside in. Now we have a nice, clean, crisp line. So there we go. It's a fun little project. If you're interested in digital pattern design, working with wallets or something like this, I offer an online course. It's a 1-hour class. Cover everything from stitch spacing, pocket design, all that stuff. Check out my website if you're interested. Here's the final product. If you like the voiceovers, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching. See you guys in the next one.